Hi, welcome to the last video for constructing our Rainbow Sunshine mini quilt. This video is going to talk about adding on the background and your raw edge applique, as well as some modifications you might want to consider if you intend to turn your mini quilt into a pillow. The first thing I want to talk about is once you add your background on here, if you have any fabric sticking out underneath, trim away as much of it as you can, especially if you're using a light background like I am. I do really recommend a light background unless your letters are all really light. Just make sure that you have a lot of contrast between your background and your letters. The next thing has to do with positioning your letters. If you are planning on making a mini quilt, you want your letters to take up as much real estate down here as you can. But if it's going to be a pillow, let me show you what happens. I have a pillow form here, and I'm just going to wrap this mini quilt kind of around it, pretending that it is a pillow, and you can see how the curve of your cushion or your insert for your pillow makes these letters curve a little bit. So if you intend to make your mini quilt into a pillow, the pattern calls and has the measurements to push your letters up just a little bit. I mean, you still want to have a little bit of room here between the top of your letter and the seam here, but you're going to push your letters up, and you're also going to tighten them and decrease the amount of space between each individual letter to give yourself as much condensing of the letters as you can to make sure that you can see as much of the letters once you have it in your cute pillow form. The next consideration, if you are making a pillow, is what stitches you use to go around your letters. Now you can see in this version that I've been making in this video series that I have chosen to do just straight line stitching around all of my raw edge applique. I have done that because this is just going to be a mini quilt and it's going to hang on the wall. It's not going to get a lot of wear and tear. It's probably not even likely ever going to need to be washed, or at least not very much, because it's just going to hang on the wall. But if you are going to turn this into a pillow, and particularly a pillow that is going to be used and loved and smushed and scrunched and enjoyed, then you're going to want to make sure that those letters are really attached to your project. And so I would recommend, instead of using a straight stitch, you're going to want to use like a zigzag stitch. Maybe make your zigzag a little wider than you normally would for raw edge applique, and also a little tighter than you normally would for raw edge applique, just to give it a really good connection and coverage around all of the edges of the fabric for your applique. The next thing that I wanted to talk about was, in the pattern, it doesn't call for adding any quilting to this bottom part down here. It says to just, you sew these down and then you're going to trim up your pillow or your mini quilt. However, I have started, and let me show you on this one that I already did. I started adding some stippling to the bottom part here. And I just really like how it adds a little bit more continuity between the quilting that I have on my rays and the quilting down here. The other thing I really like about it is how it makes these letters just kind of pop off of the bottom part of that quilt and makes the sunshine really stand out. So if you want to go ahead and add that quilting, I would do it before you square up your mini quilt instead of afterwards. And that way, if there's any little bit of shrinkage or anything like that, you can take care of that once it's already quilted. If you are, again, doing a pillow, and especially a well-loved used pillow, I would even recommend adding your stippling or your quilting over the letters themselves. That way they're all really nice and attached, and you're not going to have any motion that might cause the letters to separate or come loose or fray or anything like that. So that's just one more tip. And then the last thing I was going to talk about is, when the instructions call for you to make this 21 inches, like your bottom should be 10 inches by 21 inches, your batting is 21 inches square. That's to give you plenty of room to square things up, because you can see how the edges here get a little wonky and a little out of sorts. And it's always nice when you're binding to have a nice straight edge. Now, if you are doing a pillow, again, you want to make sure your letters are going to be as high as you can. And so you're going to want to save a bunch of this real estate down at the bottom so that your letters are more in the center of your pillow. When I am making a mini quilt, I start by trimming a good portion of this bottom part off. because I want the whole thing and I want to preserve as much color up here as I can. If I'm making a pillow, kind of do the opposite and trim just as much as I need to straighten this up, and then measure up from there and trim off as much as I need to get my 20 inches square when I am creating the pillow. So keep that in mind as you're squaring things up. The other tip with squaring is to make sure that you use your seam here as your horizon line. And what I'll tend to do is when I'm putting it on my cutting mat, I will line up this seam with whatever, with one line on my cutting mat so that this part stays straight and you don't end up like accidentally making your pillow crooked or your mini quilt a little crooked. So those are my tips for finishing off. This is a really fun project. I hope you've enjoyed sewing along with me. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments, or you can always follow me on Instagram at @amarooneydesigns. If you have any questions about binding or you don't know exactly how to do that, I have a whole series of binding on my YouTube channel. Also, if you are new to raw edge applique, I have a video that shows some tips for sewing down your applique, where to start, backstitching, moving from letter to letter, all of that stuff also on my YouTube channel. I'll link all of those videos in the notes. If you like this tutorial, I hope you'll subscribe and follow along for lots more fun sewing. And we'll talk to you later.